Hi everyone, today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Ryan Poston was born to Lisa and Jay Poston on December 30th, 1982 in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. Throughout his life, Ryan enjoyed a strong and loving relationship with his three sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth. Growing up, Ryan had the privilege of traveling the world and attending schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. In addition to his adventurous spirit, Ryan was known for his exceptional looks. His captivating features and charismatic personality made him a standout among his peers after graduating high school. Ryan continued his educational journey at Indiana University, where he majored in political science, history, and geography. He excelled in his studies and graduated with honors in 2005. Driven to follow in his family's footsteps, Ryan pursued a career in law and enrolled in Salmon P. Chase College of Law in Northern Kentucky University. With a deep admiration for the legal profession, Ryan followed in the footsteps of his esteemed grandfather and uncle, both practicing attorneys. Ryan Poston was a young man with big aspirations. One of his biggest dreams was to own a successful law firm. However, in the meantime, he worked in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he dedicated his time and energy to representing individuals who could not afford to hire more expensive attorneys. Despite his young age, Ryan had already gained a significant following. Many people sought his counsel and guidance. He worked tirelessly to ensure everyone had access to fair and competent legal representation, regardless of financial circumstances. In 2011, after a heart-wrenching breakup, Ryan sought solace and support from his cousin Carissa. During this period, he frequently traveled to Lexington, Kentucky to spend time with her. During one of those trips, his life took an unexpected turn. While in Lexington, Ryan met Shayna Hubers, originally from Lexington, Kentucky. Shayna Hubers was the epitome of a true Southern girl, known for her outgoing personality and ability to make friends effortlessly. She possessed a contagious warmth and charm that drew people towards her. After graduating from high school in 2009, with a full scholarship, she pursued her higher education at the University of Kentucky, where she majored in psychology. Then she moved on to Eastern Kentucky University, where she pursued her master's degree in psychology. Despite their age difference, Ryan was 29 and Shayna was just 21. Their feelings for each other were undeniable. With each visit Ryan made to his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he found himself spending more and more time with Shayna. The more time they spent together, the deeper their bond grew. Shayna found herself spending more and more time in Highland Heights, the suburb in Kentucky, where Ryan resided each weekend. Shayna packed a bag and made the journey to Ryan's home there. She devoted herself to taking care of him, cooking for him, and cleaning his space. As time passed, their relationship progressed, and Ryan took Shayna to meet his parents, to her friends. Shayna couldn't contain her excitement. She gushed about Ryan, declaring her desire to be Mrs. Ryan Poston. However, Ryan and Shayna's bright future fell apart on October 12, 2012. Shayna told the dispatcher that she had just killed her boyfriend Ryan. The details she shared painted a tragic picture of a domestic violence incident that had spiraled out of control. Shayna claimed that Ryan had attempted to physically abuse her, dragging her out of the house when she tried to retrieve her belongings. Shayna informed the 911 dispatcher that her boyfriend Ryan confronted her with a gun, and a physical altercation ensued. During the altercation, Shayna managed to gain possession of the firearm. However, she was intimidated by Ryan's size, and out of panic, Shayna pulled the trigger, ultimately shooting Ryan. According to Shayna, she knew that Ryan was going to die anyway, so she wanted to put him out of his misery. Shayna explained to the 911 dispatcher, because Ryan seemed to be suffering and making funny noises, she shot him several more times. She further divulged to the dispatcher that she placed the gun on a bookshelf. After the incident, minutes after Shayna called 911 and reported that she had shot her boyfriend, officers were dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, the officers instructed Shayna to exit the apartment with her hands raised. Despite her initial hesitation, Shayna complied with the officers' orders. As she walked out of the apartment, the officers instructed her to lie face down on the ground. While Shayna followed the officers' instructions, it was evident that she was very upset. After the officers handcuffed Shayna and placed her in the back of their patrol vehicle, they made entry into the apartment and discovered Ryan Poston dead on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Crime scene investigators arrived at the apartment and observed Ryan's condo, which appeared slightly messy but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. It was discovered that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned weapons. The gun Shayna used to shoot Ryan was his, Sig Sauer semi-automatic. Based on the evidence gathered at the apartment, the investigators determined that Ryan was seated at the table when Shayna opened fire. They knew this due to the presence of blood found on the table. However, the fact that several items on the dining room table were undisturbed raised doubts regarding Shayna's version of events if there had been a fight. The items would have been disturbed. The crime scene investigators meticulously combed through Ryan's apartment. Simultaneously, officers canvassed the apartment complex, hoping to gather additional information from Ryan's neighbors. One neighbor, a woman named Nikki, offered valuable information to the detective. Nikki stated that she knew Shayna quite well and believed that Shayna's dedication to Ryan was not reciprocated. According to Nikki, the couple frequently engaged in heated arguments, often disturbing the peace of the neighborhood. Several months ago, Nikki recalled an incident where Shayna appeared at her door in tears, expressing her fear of Ryan. Shayna had informed Nikki that her altercation with Ryan had turned violent, claiming that he had picked her up and thrown her down the hallway, resulting in injuries. Nikki believed Shayna's account, stating that she encouraged Shayna to report the abuse to the police. However, Shayna opted not to pursue legal action at the police station. Detectives brought Shayna into an interrogation room to interview her regarding her involvement in shooting her boyfriend Ryan. Before proceeding with the questioning, the officers read Shayna her Miranda rights, informing her of her right to an attorney. Shayna exercised this right and requested the presence of an attorney as she waited in the interrogation room. She filled out paperwork under the supervision of a detective. Despite the request for an attorney, Shayna chose to engage in conversation with the detective when asked for the name of her victim. Shayna replied, "The man I killed." This response displayed a certain coldness and detachment, as it was clear that she knew the identity of her victim, which was Ryan. Her longtime boyfriend. Shayna continued to talk to the detectives in the interrogation room. She expressed her belief that she had acted in self-defense, stating that Ryan had grabbed her by the throat and thrown her around the apartment like a rag doll. She described the entire night as a surreal and out-of-body experience. At a certain point in the investigation, the detective stepped out of the interrogation room while another officer took their place. Shayna began sharing new details with this officer regarding her encounter with Ryan. She claimed that prior to shooting him, he had said mean and nasty things to Shayna, calling her crazy and taunting her while holding a gun. According to Shayna, Ryan's behavior that night was extremely violent, which she believed was a result of him being under the influence of drugs. Throughout the interview, Shayna maintained her account of the events that led to the shooting and stated that Ryan was sitting at the dining room table, playing with ammunition for his Sig Sauer pistol. Shayna noticed him glaring at her from across the table at that moment. According to Shayna, she realized his intentions and knew he was kicking her out of his condo. She admitted to picking up the gun and shooting Ryan amidst the chaos. Shayna fired one shot, striking Ryan. Shayna's account of the incident continued, alleging that after shooting Ryan once, she noticed him twitching, believing that it was necessary to put him out of his misery. She fired several more times, ultimately killing him. During her confession, Shayna revealed to the detective that Ryan was vain. He claimed he expressed a desire for a nose job, so she took it upon herself to grant him that wish. Shayna intentionally aimed her gun at his face and pulled the trigger, resulting in him receiving the rhinoplasty he had requested during the dramatic interrogation. Shayna expressed deep concerns about her schoolwork and the damage a dead boyfriend would do to her love life. She confided that no one would want to marry her when they discovered she had murdered her boyfriend in self-defense. The detective, having listened to her statement, eventually arrested her and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna seemed genuinely shocked that she had been taken into custody, as she was at that she had shot him in self-defense in 2015. Shayna's trial began, and the courtroom was shrouded in anticipation. The prosecutor presented their opening argument, comparing Shayna to the infamous Jahd Aras. Like Shayna had been charged with murdering her boyfriend Travis Alexander, and the two cases were eerily similar. This comparison only heightened the tension in the courtroom, as everyone awaited the outcome. The prosecutor contended that Shayna was obsessed with Ryan, her ex-boyfriend. According to the prosecution, Ryan consumed Shayna's thoughts. All she ever talked about was him during the trial. The prosecutor said Ryan's friends painted a picture of his intentions. They claimed that Ryan was planning to end his relationship with Shayna and was actively avoiding her phone calls and text messages. Despite this, Shayna would still show up at his condo in Highland Heights uninvited. On the night of the murder, the state presented evidence to the jury that Ryan had a date lined up with Audrey Bolt, Miss Ohio, in 2012. This information added fuel to the prosecution's theory that Shayna was motivated by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's potential new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that she and Ryan were supposed to meet for drinks at a bar on the night of the murder. She arrived at the bar and patiently waited for Ryan, but he never came. It was not until later that she learned that he had been shot and killed during Shayna's trial. The prosecution presented evidence to the jury that showed that Ryan had repeatedly expressed his desire to end the relationship with Shayna a few days before his death. Ryan Rand called his father Jay, seeking advice on how to handle the situation. Jay testified that he had told Ryan to be nice to Shayna in order to avoid an ugly breakup. However, despite these attempts to defuse the situation, it appears that Shayna continued to manipulate Ryan. On the day that Ryan was killed, the prosecution presented evidence showing that he spent a significant amount of time exchanging texts with Shayna. In these texts, Ryan explicitly informed her that he did not want to see her that weekend, as he had other things to do. Despite this, Shayna showed up at his condo uninvited, as she often did according to the prosecution. At some point during the argument, Ryan firmly stated that it was over, and that Shayna could no longer manipulate him. The prosecutor said this seemed to infuriate Shayna, who would have raged, picked up the gun and fatally shot Ryan during Shayna's murder trial. The prosecution played the interrogation video in order to present evidence to the jury, suggesting that she was a cold-blooded murderer. In the video, Shayna's demeanor and responses appeared to support the theory that she had intentionally taken Ryan's life. The footage showed a Shayna dancing around the room and singing along to music, seemingly disregarding the gravity of the situation. This behavior seemed unusual for someone who had just killed the person they loved in self-defense. Most people in a similar situation would likely be in tears, devastated by the loss of life and the weight of their actions. The prosecution's strategy in playing the interrogation video was to portray Shayna as detached and unemotional, as suggesting that her actions were not those of someone who had killed in self-defense. They argued that her lack of tears and her carefree behavior were indicative of her guilty conscience. However, it is important to note that this interpretation was subjective and open to interpretation by the jury. Ultimately, the interrogation video played a crucial role in the prosecution's case against Shayna. Still, it was only one piece of evidence to consider alongside other evidence presented during the trial. Shayna's defense attorneys maintained a consistent narrative throughout her trial, asserting that Ryan was the one who acted erratically and violently on the night of the incident, which ultimately led to her shooting him. To support this claim, the defense painted a picture of Ryan's state of mind, alleging that a combination of drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety meds and amphetamines, played a significant role in his behavior. To strengthen their argument, Shayna's attorneys presented the jury with autopsy results that revealed the presence of the aforementioned drugs in Ryan's system. This evidence served to reinforce the notion that his actions were influenced by the substances he was under the influence of. Shayna's attorneys called an expert toxicologist to testify on her behalf. This witness stated that a combination of drugs like anti-anxiety meds and amphetamines could potentially cause someone to be violent and paranoid. By presenting this expert testimony, the defense aimed to establish a plausible justification for Shayna's actions, casting doubt on deliberate intent. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution became increasingly concerned about her chances of acquittal. As a smart young pretty woman, they worried her self-defense claim might sway the jury. However, their fears were put to rest on April 23rd, when the jury returned with a guilty verdict convicting Shayna of murdering her boyfriend Ryan Poston. At the sentencing hearing in August 2015, Shayna continued to blame Ryan for his death, which angered his friends and family. Despite the evidence presented during the trial, Shayna maintained her innocence and refused to accept responsibility for her actions in Kentucky. If the judge determines that a defendant was a victim of domestic violence, they may be eligible for reduced parole after serving only 20% of their sentence. However, The judge in this case did not believe that Shayna was entitled to the reduced parole, saying that she had committed a cold-blooded murder. The judge sentenced Shayna to 40 years in prison, meaning that she will be eligible for parole in 17 years, when she is 41 years old in 2032. After Shayna Hubers was sentenced, she appealed for a new trial, which a judge granted in August 2016. The basis for granting the appeal was that one of the jurors had concealed their felony conviction, which violated Kentucky law. Felons are prohibited from serving on juries in August 2018, after a lengthy delay of 4 months. Shayna's second trial for the murder of Ryan Poston commenced. Opening arguments were presented by Shayna's defense attorney, who stated that in the year and a half that she dated Ryan, she made every effort to please him. However, their romantic relationship suffered. As a result, according to the defense attorney, on the first night that Shayna and Ryan met, he was both sexually and physically violent toward her. This incident had a lasting impact on her, and it took her several weeks to respond to his messages. Afterward, Shayna's defense attorneys further claimed that when she was in high school, she had been sexually assaulted, leading to a long history of alcohol abuse and promiscuity. It was argued that this traumatic experience had contributed to her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense team's strategy was to present a sympathetic portrayal of Shayna, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They aimed to challenge the prosecution's narrative and convince the jury that her behavior was driven by a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. Esh's defense team sought to portray her as a victim of domestic violence at Ryan's hands rather than as a cold-blooded murderer. They argued that Shayna's actions were driven not by a desire for revenge or financial gain, but rather as a result of years of abuse at the hands of her former partner. One of the key arguments put forth by Shayna's defense attorney was that Ryan had badgered her about her weight and chest size, constantly making negative comments and pressuring her to enlarge her breasts. This constant criticism and pressure, the defense claimed, contributed to Shayna's low self-esteem and contributed to her feelings of inadequacy. The defense also alleged that Ryan and Shayna's sexual relationship had been strained, with frequent arguments and frustration on both sides. It was contended that Ryan's desire for a more romantic and intimate connection was not fulfilled, leading to the growing distance between them. To support their claim, the defense presented evidence that Shayna had received a shot to boost her romantic life. This injection, they said, was sought as a means to address the couple's sexual difficulties and improve their relationship. However, the defense argued that Ryan's constant rejection and disinterest further exacerbated the strain on their relationship, leading Shayna to become increasingly frustrated and isolated. Furthermore, the defense alleged that Ryan would frequently break it off with Shayna and then engage in conversations with other women. During their opening statement, the prosecution informed the jury that they were not aiming to portray Ryan Poston as the perfect boyfriend. However, they maintained that he was not an abusive individual. They argued that Shayna did not act in self-defense when she fatally shot Ryan. Instead, they alleged that Shayna shot Ryan because he had ended their relationship on the night of the shooting. The prosecution stated that it was finally time for Ryan to break up with Shayna, as she refused to leave him alone. Despite the breakup, Shayna always returned, even after Ryan had ended things with her. According to the prosecution, this behavior was evidence of Shayna's inability to move on from the relationship. One of Ryan's work friends testified in court that the breakup between him and Shayna this time would be permanent because Ryan had never broken up with Shayna face-to-face before he claimed that Shayna had been relentless in her efforts to keep him during the trial. The prosecution presented text messages from Shayna to her friends, in which the woman expressed that the romantic acts she and Ryan had engaged in had brought them closer together. However, Shayna, who testified in her own defense at her second trial, refuted this claim, stating that it had actually driven them apart. In another exchange of text messages, Shayna requested intercourse, but Ryan was taking antidepressants and was not physically driven due to the side effects of the medication. However, when Shayna took this stand, she alleged that Ryan had forced her to engage in sexual intercourse after 5 hours of deliberation. The jury once again convicted Shayna of murdering Ryan. Despite contradictory testimonies and conflicting evidence, the jury reached their decision, upholding their initial verdict. During the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother addressed the judge, sharing an emotional story about her daughter's singing talent and its role in securing multiple college scholarships through tears. She pleaded for the jury to consider granting parole to Shayna, asserting that she still had the opportunity to impact people's lives positively. However, she made it clear that her pleas did not diminish the grief and pain being experienced by Ryan Poston's family. Ultimately, Shayna was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. According to sentencing terms, Shayna will be required to serve at least 17 years before she can be considered for parole. In 2032, she is serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky.